So, how last time we did one of these, basically every single mock said Cooper DeJean was for the Packers. Well, turns out you cut an offensive lineman who only played one game last year, and everybody just wants to give you bulk. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews, where I'm your host, John Delray. Today, going across the country, looking at all different mock drafts from different national analysts. I did sneak in a couple Packer people here as well, but taking a look at what are the mock draft selections for the Green Bay Packers, kind of giving us a gauge as to what some national folks especially are thinking. And at the very least, we can take away from this positionally. Where are they looking? Or perhaps even get an idea as to where certain players may be for Packers picking at 25. So I've got a whole bunch of them here, 12 mock drafts actually, most of them just for one round. And that's really what I'm going to focus on. A couple of them did go further into their drafts, offering one was like 3 rounds, one was 5 rounds. And I'll just list off what those picks were. But the real focus here is the first round selection for each team. So let's get right to it. We're going to dive in with mock draft number 1. This one coming from Brad Spielberger of PFF. He put out this mock draft on March 25th, had the Packers sticking at pick 25. And with that pick, he had them choosing Tyler Guyton, 22-year-old tackle from the University of Oklahoma. As for his notes here, Brad did put, he's raw, but athleticism and tools are apparent, making it a very Packers pick. He also went on to say that the Packers may consider cornerback given their needs there. As for mock draft number 2, put out by Josh Edwards of CBS Sports, this one published just yesterday, March 28th, and he actually had the Packers doing a trade with Miami to move up from pick 25 up to pick 21. And to do that trade, he said, Packers are going to trade 25 and one of their third rounders, 91, for pick 21 and a 2025 fourth rounder. So at pick 21, what exactly did the Packers do? Well, they chose the big dude, Amarius Mims, 21-year-old tackle from Georgia. And in here, Josh Edwards did say the Packers can't sit still and get a great left tackle prospect, so they've got to trade up. Now, if you're wondering my thoughts now that we're into this a little bit, I'll be giving all that at the end. Not a ton of analysis today, just a lot of reporting, but I will summarize with some thoughts at the very end. As for his other selections, because this was a 3-round mock, he also had pick 41 being Kamari Lassiter, the corner from Georgia, pick 58, the safety from Washington State, Jaden Hicks, and then pick 88, Leonard Taylor, defensive tackle from Miami, and then, of course, no pick 91 since that was involved in the trade. Next up, Eric Edholm of the NFL.com on March 29th, today, just earlier this morning, said with pick 25, the Green Bay Packers would be selecting that dude from Duke, Graham Barton, 21 years old. And for the rationale, he basically said the Packers love versatile offensive linemen, and Barton's got it. He does project as a center or guard in the NFL. And then I thought this was very interesting because I haven't seen this anywhere else. Eric Edholm goes on to say that athletically speaking, he has a similar profile to the departed John Runyon Jr., but a substantially higher ceiling. As for the next mock draft, this one put out by Bucky Brooks, again of NFL.com, as we're trenching through their territory. This would be March 26th. He put this out, sticking at pick 25, and he goes in an entirely different direction, completely different. He has him going with an off-ball linebacker, Peyton Wilson. Yeah, the linebacker from North Carolina State. And in it here, he says, see ball, get ball linebacker. Could be an impact player early in his career, in spite of off-ball linebacker not generally being viewed as a premium position. He also does note that the medicals here need to check out. And yeah, if you haven't looked into Peyton Wilson's injury history before, it's quite extensive. It goes all the way back to high school, but at the same time, if it weren't for those injuries, he might very well be linebacker 1. So I get what he's saying here, but that is a departure from the norm. That much is for sure. Next up, Daniel Jeremiah, certainly one of NFL.com's draft gurus. I had to go back in time a little bit since his latest mock, but I did really want to represent Jeremiah here. And on March 19th, he had the Packers sticking at pick 25, and we're doubling back to this guy. I said we'd be adding bulk. Amarius Mims, again, the pick for the Packers. Of the 21-year-old from Georgia, he said could go several different directions, but Mims's upside is difficult to ignore and very tempting here. Next up, Jacob Westendorf, a writer for Packers Central, a branch of Sports Illustrated. On March 27th, he put out a mock, and having pick 25, for the first time here in this roundup, we get to see, I got Cooper DeJean, 21-year-old from Iowa. And here, Westendorf basically says sometimes obvious is obvious for a reason. Nickel or safety, put him in either one. He said that Goot has said that he wants to get younger at safety next to McKinney. Put DeJean there. Yeah, that fits the bill. Now, this was a longer mock draft from Westendorf, so I decided to include a couple of the additional picks here. At pick 41, he's got Zach Frazier, the interior offensive lineman from West Virginia. 58, Kieran Amagaji, the tackle / maybe guard from Yale. Not quite sure where he'd be in the NFL. Pick 88 was Trey Benson, the running back from Florida State. 91, Jarian Jones, the corner from Florida State, who actually has had a Packer top 30 visit. Pick 126, Cooper Beebe, the interior offensive lineman from Kansas State. And 169, Luke McCaffrey, the wide receiver from Rice. Moving on to the next mock draft. Dallas Robinson of the Pro Football Network on March 27th published an article saying that the Green Bay Packers would be choosing Amarius Mims. Yeah, I know. You're noticing a trend, right? And he notes that Mims blew up the scouting combine and that the Packers excel and develop mid-round tackles better than anybody else in the league. So to spend a first-round pick would be a departure for the Packers. He also says, with starters already in place, though, they could take the time to develop Mims. He also notes that Mims is not very experienced collegiately. Yes, he was in school for 3 years, but under 10 career starts. So certainly something of note is there. I find this particular rationale very interesting. So he says, let's just break this down a little farther, because he says Mims blew up the scouting combine. Okay. And then he says, the Packers excel and develop mid-round tackles better than anybody. So yeah, spend a first-round pick. All right, so we've already got one departure from the norm here, right? Then he says, but with starters already in place, we could pick Mims. Both of the starters for the Packers are only going to be third-year players who've got 2 years left on their contract. So Mims, a developmental first-rounder, I'm not saying it would be a poor selection by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying his rationale here, at least in my head, seems to kind of continually conflict against itself. But I just thought that was very interesting. Next up, the next mock draft. This one put out by Charles McDonald and Nate Tice. They kind of did a joint mock draft for Yahoo Sports on March 27th. And at pick 25, going back to an oldie but a goodie here, we're going back to Tyler Guyton, the tackle from Oklahoma. And the rationale given here was that Green Bay needs to groom Bakhtiari's replacement. Guyton could play left tackle or right tackle, and the Packers need to stack the position with talent. Next up, Pete Prisco from CBS Sports, March 28th, put out a mock, pick 25, the Packers choosing Cooper DeJean, 21 years old from Iowa. Packers need cornerback. And he could even slide inside to safety if need be. Short, sweet, and to the point from Pete Prisco. And he did say that the Packers need a cornerback, was kind of created due to the Rasul Douglas trade, but nonetheless, he likes DeJean for the Packers because he could do either position. Next, I did go with one a little bit more local here, and I went with Sarah Bedinger, who is a writer for Dairyland Express. On March 28th, he put out a lengthy mock draft, and again, something very similar here, pick 25, sticking with Cooper DeJean, and the rationale, cornerback or safety, that's going to be up to Hafley, but he can play, and that's what matters the most. As for a few of his other selections, at 41, he did take Edgerrin Cooper. He also took at 58, Max Melton, the corner from Rutgers. Pick 88, Braylon Allen, the running back from Wisconsin. 91, Dominic Pooney, the tackle, or just let's say O-lineman, because he does have some interior experience from Kansas. 126 was linebacker Jalen Ford from Texas, and then 169, Garrett Greenfield, an offensive lineman from San Diego State. So another one that I had to move back in time for a little bit. I wanted to include this as well. Mel Kiper, yeah, the hair himself from ESPN. March 19th, he put out a mock draft. And here he said that the Packers would actually be choosing Laiatu Latu, the 23-year-old edge rusher from UCLA. And again, I thought this was some incredibly interesting rationale. Kiper goes on to say that he loves his fit with the Packers and calls him the best pure edge rusher in the draft. He acknowledges that they did pick LVN last year. And you know what? Kiper didn't say it, but I will say it. Kiper actually kind of nailed the LVN pick for the Packers last year. So he probably deserves a little bit of attention at least. But he did say that, yes, the Packers picked Lucas Van Ness last year, but LVN is more power, run stopper, not necessarily a double-digit sack machine like Latu has the capacity to be. I thought that was incredibly interesting. It certainly would stack the Packers up at edge rusher, but I'll be talking about that more in just a minute. And then the last mock draft we are going to cover here, for now at least, would be Walt from Walter Football. Just earlier today, putting out a mock draft has the Packers sticking at pick 25, and as has been the pick from Walter Football for a while, Cooper DeJean, the defensive back from Iowa. And you talk about short and sweet. He just goes, traded away Douglas, big hole at cornerback. DeJean is instinctive and versatile. And now you know. That's really all there is to it. So as for our final results from 12 mock drafts, 10 of which being national to a little bit more local. But here you can see 50% of them, 6 of the 12, saying that the Packers will go with offensive line in the first round. 5 of the 12 specifically calling out tackles, Guyton or Mims. 1 of the 12 saying Graham Barton from Duke. Then you've got a couple of just one-off selections there. Of course, 8.5% overall, just 1 of the 12 saying that they should go with edge. That was, of course, Latu with Kiper. 8.5% linebacker Peyton Wilson at Bucky Brooks from NFL.com. And then you've got 33%, 4 of the 12 mock drafts calling for Cooper DeJean, or just a defensive back in general, but all of them just happen to be DeJean. 4 of 12 mock drafts all saying the same thing. So ultimately, like what I'm thinking here, and I have not been shy about this, okay? I will not be upset at all. Don't get me wrong. If the Packers go with an offensive lineman in the first, I have been wondering though, okay, this is kind of a larger thought. So give me just a second to really get into it. I, of course, won't be upset if they go with offensive line in the first round. I've detailed how Royce Newman happens to be their only interior backup offensive lineman. Right now, behind Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom at tackle, you've got Caleb Jones and Luke Danuta as your backup tackles. Is offensive line a need? Yes, absolutely, unequivocally, both in the short term and in the long term. I would argue maybe long term a little bit more, except for right guard. So would I be upset with an offensive lineman choice? Absolutely not. But I do not see them, or at least historically, they have not gone with an interior offensive lineman as their first round selection. We're talking like multiple decades since the Packers have chosen an interior offensive lineman to be their first round pick. And according to basically anything you can find, Graham Barton projects as a guard and center in the NFL with maybe some tackle versatility. So that means they'd basically be drafting him as an interior offensive lineman who's just versatile enough to kick out. I do, however, have one little bit of reasoning that says maybe the Packers might deviate from their historical precedents. Brian Gutekunst, generally speaking, has spent his first round picks on premium position players. Cornerback, cornerback, edge rusher, right? Generally speaking, with a few exceptions, most notably Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt a couple years ago. But generally speaking, it's those premium positions. How do you define a premium position? One that has great importance on the football field, but then also 2, guys who get paid a lot. And the interior offensive line, as we've seen in the last 2 years, has had their compensation radically increase to where now a lot of guards are signing contracts that are looking like $15 million, $16 million contracts. John Runyon Jr., who was basically like in a half rotation with Sean Ryan, a guy who a lot of people took for granted as a starter in Green Bay, he got a $10 million deal per year from the Giants. So is interior offensive line kind of becoming more of a premium position like tackle generally is thought of? So, given the historical precedent, do I think they'll do it? No, I think Goot is very much rooted in his tendencies. So, do I think they will? No. But if they do happen to go with Graham Barton, an interior offensive lineman, maybe it's because they're viewing it as a up and coming premium position. As for the offensive line on the whole, I do think, yes, it is a need. No doubt about it. It is a need that I personally would probably address in the later rounds because offensive line is probably the deepest position in this draft class. There are other positions that are not nearly as deep, and I probably would address them first. Now, looking over the other positions, Peyton Wilson, I don't mind that selection at all. And I already said if it weren't for the injuries, he probably would be the number one off-ball linebacker in this draft. But it's really hard to say whether that would be a smart selection or not until, well, we won't ever know, but until there's a better idea of the medicals. As for Latu, Mel Kiper's pick, it would be surprising, not necessarily that they choose an edge, but Latu, at least last time I checked, unless he's really packing on some weight, did appear to be pretty small for how the Packers generally like their edges. So that would be an exception from their typical thresholds in that way. Would I be shocked by an edge rusher? No. But is it their greatest need? No. It also, you could argue, wasn't last year either, and that didn't really seem to stop them. And then last, the defensive back, Cooper DeJean. Yeah, I mean, are there other DBs? Certainly, especially if you were to go up and get earlier in the draft. Like if Goot fell in love with somebody and wanted Quentin Mitchell or wanted Tyrion Arnold, or like he wanted to go up and get somebody. Totally. But Cooper DeJean seems to be, having not done any workouts, seems to be talked about most frequently in like this area of early 20s, maybe even 25. And if that's the case, I got to say, I do really like the pick for Green Bay. Even in my latest mock draft that I put out on Monday, he was my first round selection with who was on the board. So all in all, there you have it. 12 mock drafts. I would say varying results, but not really. Like half of all of the mock drafts are going at one particular area, of course, the offensive line, and then the other ones, Cooper DeJean, with just a couple outliers of difference. So thanks so much for joining me here on Lombardi Time Brews. That is it for today. I will be back on Monday. We'll see what news develops over the weekend, but make sure to tune in Monday and then next Wednesday for Lombardi Time Brews live. So thanks so much for joining me. I do hope you have a fantastic weekend and a very, very happy Easter if that is something that you celebrate. So, and as always, go Pack Go.